Hello, it's Sarah from Hardcover Hearts, and I'm here back with my regular scheduled programming, which is my week of reading. So this is going to be a really long one because the last time I did this was pre-rush, and so I'm going to put a little bit of my rush reading in here too. So stay tuned. I'll try to keep it concise as I go through, but got a lot to talk about. So let's just jump right to it. The first thing that I finished On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong. Now, I didn't sit well with this book. I think there were some passages that were lovely, but there were a lot of things that just didn't work for me. Specifically, the book was set itself up as a letter. The opening is that he is writing to his mother. This character, little dog, is writing to his mother, and his mother can't read. So already interesting premise, but you expect there to be a dialogue and some sort of connection to that person, but it didn't maintain the construct of that frame. And so for me, as I started thinking about it and trying to think about what didn't work for me, that was one of many things that didn't. I'm going to put a link to a video that I think did a remarkable job at articulating the flaws of this book. Some that I saw and some that I didn't, but now that they've been pointed out, it's kind of obvious. But fundamentally, this just didn't work for me, and I was very disappointed because I think a lot of us are rooting for Ocean Vuong, and if you've seen him speak, he's just a lovely person, and I think that as a poet, he's doing great work. Even if this was kind of pushing the boundaries of experimental, it still didn't work for me in terms of experimental books. So sad to say, did not like On Earth We Were Briefly Gorgeous, and I sold it. So bye. I don't have it to show, the physical copy. Next up, I read, this is for my in real life book clubs that I do with two dear friends of mine, and that's Where the Dead Sit and Talk, and this is by Brandon Hobson. I'm not going to talk anything about that because we have to meet and discuss it. But let me just say that this was on the short list for the National Book Award. So moving on to the next book, one reader and I were communicating when he was in London, and he told me that he got this book, The Diary of a Bookseller, and this is by Sean Bythell. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. And I remember I've heard about this so many times, and what was so interesting is I had just had a conversation with Brad, who owns one of my favorite local bookstores and one that I promote through all the links that I have below, and that is East Bay Booksellers. And so I thought, oh, well, it would be interesting to hear from the perspective of a bookseller and the owner of a bookshop. And so I listened to the audio, and I have to say I really enjoyed. I think if I had read it, I would not have gotten the tone in the way that it came through. There is something really lovely about hearing the tallies every single day, the tallies of how many customers they had and how much money they made. And I realized my instinctive capitalist nature is I immediately wanted to create a spreadsheet and start looking for opportunities to increase the sales and to market better. And it's not my job, and we're just reading a book. Nobody asked me for that help, so I'm not going to do it. But it was just I found that instinct that I had to do that. So really interesting book. If you like a small town, and if you want just a very narrow glimpse of one person in their daily lives, I think this was a really good book. Now there are know that he is an obnoxious character and cranky. There's some things that didn't sit well with me. some questions of some kind of jokes about androgyny or transgender that didn't sit well with me, as well as just some making fun of people that I don't find to be something I like to participate with. But I also think that he makes fun of himself and puts himself up for the butt of the joke many times as well. So keep that in mind as you read through that. Then I tore through the reading rush, which I didn't think I was going to do. I really didn't. I thought maybe I'll do it, maybe I'll try it, and I just went for it, and I'm stunned. I think as I mentioned in one of my wrap up videos for Reading Rush, I think that he was having a lot of short books. But I did myself a disservice by having most of them be physical copies, even though I made it through. So let's kind of hit through the ones that I read. I read Jhumpa Lahiri's The Clothing of Books. Really cute book. She talks a lot about covers and about book covers and how they get chosen and what it says and what it means and her own experience as an author, and having covers of books and what it's meant to her. So that was a nice little read. My first Samuel Pepys. This was The Great Fire of London. This is one of the Penguin Little Black Classics editions. I have the entire series, so I need to start reading them. So I'm going to anticipate seeing more of these in the future. This is number 47, and this was just a delight. If you've ever been curious and you don't want to read the voluminous amount of his diaries that he has put together, this is remarkable because it really hones in on a very specific Silverian time right before the Great Fire breaks out, right when the plague is also coming and starting to appear. And so there's just, I'm always fascinated when multiple catastrophic events happen simultaneously. Fantastic, really great read. Highly recommended if you're interested in that thing. This is nonfiction. Next up was An Episode in the Life of a Landscape Painter. This is by Cesar Ira. And this was just still thinking about this. I'm still thinking about this. I loved the characters. I loved the setting. There's some absolutely bizarre things that happen. Beautiful imagery. I'm really interested in seeing more of what this author has to do. Next was The Return of the Soldier by Rebecca West. And so I basically copycatted Sean the Book Maniac because he had mentioned this. I wasn't enjoying my book and I needed to shuffle my TBR. And I remembered I had this. So glad that I picked this up. Little flowery language everyone is saying, but I thought it was beautiful. I thought very interesting setup about having a third party as the narrator of this story. So it's the story of a man coming back from war, and he has, in essence, has been a victim of a bomb, and the bomb has caused him to lose the last 15 years of his life. And so he is not aware that he was married, and he still thinks he's in love with the woman that he was in love with before going to the war. And he doesn't really recognize that he's aged. And so the world has changed, and they kept moving on, and he's arrives back. And this is told from the perspective of his cousin, who is kind of staying with them in their mansion or country estate. Some horrible characters, some really great characters. There was a lot here. And I think the ending really spoke to me. And I think this one did a fantastic job at the end of really bringing you full circle with some interesting and compelling questions. So I thought Return of the Soldier was a fantastic read. Then I read Pond, and I'm not really doing these in order. I read Pond. And Pond, I think I did rush a little bit. So normally I'm a very fast reader, but in doing this with Reading Rush, I didn't really give myself the time to really think. And this was more of a meditative book, and it really deserved a little bit more a slower intake for this, but I enjoyed it. Next up was The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton. This is part of you had to read a book and watch the movie, and I was shocked at how well this stood the test of time. Really great portrayals of non-toxic masculinity, despite the fact that there's a bunch of hoodlums and fighting and all of that. And then probably my favorite book that I've read in this whole shebang has been God of Jade and Shadow. This is I just love in the days right now where we're getting a lot of Greek and Roman mythology, that we're getting Mayan mythology and Aztec, and I think it's Mayan. It does not say. Yes, Mayan underworld. So just really fun, so smart. Sometimes I lose the thread in these, and I get a little irritated. I'm like, okay, let's just get on with it. This one, the pace was fantastic. The characters were great. I was very invested and learned so much. I don't think I pulled out Google to learn how to say and pronounce something as much as I did with this book. So that was so much fun, and it's a brand new release. Then not going to say a lot about this because still waiting to do the wrap up with Olive and Jacqueline. And so this is Kintu by Jennifer Nansubuga Makumbi. This is multi-generational Ugandan novel, so we'll be wrapping this up soon. Stay tuned. And then I listened to 2 books. I kind of needed a break from the heavy, weighty material. And my hold came up at the library for the audiobook of The Wedding Party by Jasmine Guillory. And she's a local Bay Area author. And so she kind of interweaves a bunch of California and Bay Area things. It was fun, nice romance. One point of contention, I didn't like the inclusion of leftist radical protesters in the narrative. Seemed a bit bizarre, especially because what she claimed that they would have been protesting, they would have been for, so it didn't really make sense. But other than that, slight nit. It was a fun read, and especially good for people who like romance. And then lastly was Fleishman is in Trouble, and this is by Taffy Brodesser-Akner. And so I really was waiting to figure this book out and trying to see, like, well, what is it trying to say and where is it going to take me? Because I'm not a particular fan of domestic dramas or, yeah, I guess that is, because it's the story of a gentleman who's getting divorced and he's kind of sowing his wild oats, and he's involved in technology and this Tinder and Grinders and all of these kind of dating apps, and it's unveiling this whole new sexual landscape for him, and he's just kind of out there doing his thing. And his wife, who he is divorcing, disappears. She drops off the kids and then won't come back and get them, and so now he's left with the kids. And I just don't relate as well to stuff like that. And I think I stayed to the end because there are some people that I know. I think Sonia had, and I'll put her channel below. I think she read this and wanted to be able to chat with her about it. In fact, I think I'm going to look you up on Voxer in case you're there, Sonia, to get a sense. She's at an Enthusiastic Reader channel. And I think the last chapter really said something, and it said more to me than I think most of the previous chapters had, or that last little bit. So I think it redeemed itself. I'm just not sure if it redeemed itself entirely for me. But no harm, no foul. At least I'm aware of the book, and you speed it up on audio and get through it quickly. It was all great. Okay, so next up, so doing with Vuong, doing the Goldfinch as a read along. I've put in a different video up for this. We'll be talking about this as we go through the read along with the check-ins. Also have a great buddy read going on simultaneously, and this is A God in Ruins. So very excited to get to this. This is Kate Atkins. It's a sequel to Life After Life, but pivoting on a different character. And then I have Celestial Bodies, which I'm still in the process of reading. Now that I finished Kintu, I can return back to this. It was feeling a little too similar with multi-generational, multi-perspective. So I wanted to tease them apart and separate them a bit. So I'll continue with this. And then I really wanted a Woman in Translation audiobook because I had finished Fleishman's in Trouble. And I reached out to Bookish Twitter and it got a lot of great responses, but not everything was available either in audio format or actually available. Britta recommended The Elegance of the Hedgehog by Muriel Barbary, and I started listening to it, and the narration's fantastic. And there's a child character, and I usually don't like child narrations. Sometimes children can be a little too extra, but I think this one's good. And then in terms of my mood reading roulette, this is Women in Translation Month, so I'm going to do a whole separate video of all the books in translation written by women that I've been collecting over the last few years to read, and didn't really even think about an entire month of being able to get to them. So I'm going to show you what I have in hard copy and some things that are interesting to me, and I'll make that a separate video. Whew, okay, so many books. Thank you so much for sitting here and listening to all this. I appreciate your time, and I hope you have a fantastic weekend and fantastic pile of books just waiting for you. Thanks. Talk to you later. Bye.